Hi, my name is Laura. I'm the creative director over at Big Brothers Big Sisters of Tampa Bay, and I'm super excited to be doing this panel. We have awesome people from Equality Florida and from Metro, and so they're going to be here to kind of help us answer some questions. So let's start with Hannah. Hannah, go ahead and introduce yourself, your name, not your full name, but your name and what you do.
Yeah, I'm Hannah. I use she, her, and they, them pronouns. I'm an LGBTQ program specialist with Metro Inclusive Health. And Metro is an LGBT nonprofit and healthcare organization located in Tampa Bay, Florida. We offer over 100 services to the community, so our reach is pretty wide. But the short gist of it is that we provide inclusive primary healthcare services alongside HIV testing, treatment, and care. We provide free community programs, which is my domain. I primarily do youth programs. And so recently we actually had our first ever fully virtual LGBT summer camp, which was quite the grand experiment, and it went really well. We're actually gearing up for our second week now. But we have tri-weekly LGBT programming for youth ages 13 to 17. We also have trans youth under 12, trans community programming more broadly with peer support groups and social groups, and programs for LGBT elders too. And all of those are, of course, free. We have continued to offer everything. Even though we've moved fully virtual, we know that it's incredibly important to stay socially connected and to not lose access to those support systems. And so all of our groups are still functioning. And so if you need support, if you need resources in the community, you can check out metrotampabay.org. And that is who I'm here representing.
Awesome. And now we have Ez from Equality Florida. So go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey, everybody. My name is Ez Rodriguez. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. And I'm the Pinellas Safe and Healthy Schools Coordinator with Equality Florida. So I work from Equality Florida, but we are working in partnership, very close partnership with Pinellas County Schools at the district office. So I am one of the 15 or 16 people on their amazing prevention team. So they handle everything that has to do with mental health, anti-bullying, LGBTQ, trauma-informed care, any kind of threat assessment. So I am there to provide a train-the-trainer model and also train our administrators, student services professionals, and educators on how to have safe learning environments for LGBTQ students, staff, and families. LGBTQ kids, we have stats that show that they are becoming gap groups in some of our schools, which means they're not doing well academically, emotionally, mentally. So we need to know what's going on in their worlds and how we as adults can step in and be supportive, and how we can train other educators to be supportive, because we're talking about our public schools, and our public schools operate on the basis of equity. Equity means understanding all of our families and our students and how they show up in the world and giving them what they need to succeed. So Equality Florida is the state's largest LGBTQ equity organization. We have two sides. We have a C3 side and a C4 side. And our C4 side is more like lobbying, going to the Capitol, trying to help people pass bills that are equitable for all kids, adults, and elders in the state. Then we have our field team and elections, and that's the C4 kind of side. And then we have our side, and that is our Safe and Healthy Schools program. So we are a gigantic department of 4 people, and we are all over the state. We've actually been in conversation and work with 62 out of 67 of our school districts. So as you can imagine, when we're not under the constraints of COVID, we are always in the car, traveling on a plane, going places, and bringing our services and education to places that ask us for resources, because we want to make sure that our rural and outstate communities, our mid-size and our large districts are covered with resources and support. So thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. And finally, we have Kate from our very own Big Brothers Big Sisters. You probably have talked to Kate in the past if you are a Big and Little following us. So Kate, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, my name is Kate Griffin. I'm the Pinellas Match Support Supervisor with Big Brothers Big Sisters. And in case there is anyone on who does not follow Big Brothers Big Sisters and found this Ask Me Anything another way, we are a one-to-one mentoring program. Big Brothers Big Sisters of Tampa Bay serves 7 counties. And if not, if you live outside of our 7 counties, there are other wonderful Big Brothers Big Sisters agencies. So whether you are a child looking for a supportive adult in your life, or if you are an adult hoping to be that mentor to a child, we are here for you. And we have these wonderful community partners to help us make sure we're armed with the tools to support all of our youth and to show up for them.
That's awesome. So thank you guys for being here. I do see that there's some people in the chat right now. So the way that this is going to kind of go is really just an ask me anything. I'll be moderating. So if you have any questions that you want to ask, we ask that you please put it in the chat. I know there might be a button function for you to ask questions. I can't currently see those right now. So please just ask in the chat, or if you'd like to have a private question, feel free to put it as a DM because I can see those as well. So let's start this thing. If there's not any questions coming in right now, so let's go ahead and ask some questions that we had. And here's one that I hear quite a bit, and it pertains a lot to I would think younger, but sometimes sometimes people who just kind of don't understand where they are or haven't had that space to explore. So, how do I know when it's time to come out?
That's one of the things that we talk about most in our community programs. We see up to 100 LGBTQ youth a week from all around the country in all different environments. So as Ez said, it's equally important to reach people living in rural areas as it is in metropolitan areas. But that also means that your network of support and your resources available to you are different. And so there's a really fantastic resource that I always refer youth to when they're thinking about coming out, and that is the Trevor Project's Coming Out Handbook. It's a really great way to gauge your personal safety and your circumstance. And so some of the first questions that you want to ask yourself if you're considering coming out, the first one and the biggest one is, am I in a safe circumstance in which I can come out? The answer is oftentimes yes. The answer can feel scary, but a lot of times youth do have, either a teacher that they really trust and know that they will be supported by, who they might go to first, or their parents might seem accommodating and it could just be scary. But there are circumstances too where coming out could risk encountering homelessness or putting yourself at risk, or if your mental health is, you just want to check in with yourself first. There are certain things that you want to make sure that you have a handle on before you move towards coming out, because there is no right time to come out. I think that there's a lot of pressure placed on coming out in our society, and something that I wish I had been told when I was a queer young person myself was that I did not need to come out in order to be valid and in order to explore my own queerness. And I think that you need to really figure out when is the right time for you. But some of the first steps are asking yourself questions like, who do I trust and support in my life? Who's the first person I want to talk to? What resources or community supports are available to me? Like, for example, some of our youth who find us are people that have thought about coming out but are a little bit scared to do it and want to hear the stories and perspectives of other teenagers that have already gone through this process on their own. And so finding those either online, if you don't have access to an LGBT center in your area, but now because of so many programs moving virtual, you probably do have access to that. You just need to find it. Metro is one of those things. But finding spaces that you can ask questions of other people, hear their experiences, really being mindful of your own situation and knowing that there is no right time. I don't know. What do you think, Ez?
Well, I agree with everything that you said. I have, over the past year or two, started to think and speak about it as not maybe coming out, but letting in. I think that kind of, because when we say coming out, we have so many stories and people in the past are like, oh, when I came out and it was so scary and I was crying and everything. And I think when we say letting in, that feels more empowering sometimes. So maybe having it as coming out / letting in for kids to think about, for youth to think about, or anybody really. And one other thing that I would just add to all the wonderful things that you said is that coming out isn't a singular event, it's a process. So as Hannah said, you might want to think about who the first people you want to tell are and how you want to tell them. And then I've worked with youth that have said, I really want to tell my adults at home, whether it be parents or family members, and they said, but I'm not good being in front of someone and speaking something. So I've worked on letters with them. So they have sent either an email or written a handwritten letter, because sometimes when people read something that is jarring or new information, it lets them sit better with it and not be so reactive. Because I know some of our youth, all of our youth really that I've worked with, fear of being thrown out, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually. Those are things that our youth are dealing with. So I think that sometimes a written preempt to a conversation can be really helpful for someone who's coming out. I think also to have, to definitely have a few people that you do trust and have come out to, if you have a counselor or you have a community leader that you come out to, a leader of faith, knowing that there is somebody to fall back with if you do get pushed negatively by family members of the people who you love and who take care of you and who you don't want to lose. So really just kind of having that safety net is important too.
I just want to say I really love the reframing of letting someone in, because when I think about that language, coming out feels like you were like hiding somewhere, right? Like hiding a core part of yourself. Whereas letting someone in is more like you are giving something of yourself to them that is really special. And I like thinking of it that way. I love that as.
I love that too. Somebody also in the chat said that. So that was a beautiful sentiment. I got to use that more. That was really great. Kate, do you have anything to add?
No, that was said beautifully. I think it's also important to think about, and you guys touched on it by saying, who is it you want to talk to first and share things with? But the first person you tell, you're bestowing an honor on them by them being the first person that you let in. So think about that, who you want to share in that celebration with. And definitely safety is first. That's that is our main focus in Big Brothers Big Sisters. You've got to be safe. So thinking about your motivation for why you feel right now is the right time. Are there societal pressures, or is it that you're ready to celebrate with those that you love and those that you trust, every part of your authentic self, and really taking that to heart. So thank you for saying it so beautifully, Hannah and Ez.
That's awesome. So we have one question here from the chat, and maybe Kate, you can speak to this. Maybe I can help try to speak to this a little bit. But what is Big Brothers Big Sisters doing to support littles that are coming out to their bigs, but not to their parents yet?
So we have definitely encountered that quite often. It can be easier, perhaps, for a little. A big is someone that you're very close to. It's a mentor you spend a lot of time with. But there's also a little more distance. Maybe you're not ready to tell your primary caregivers, but you've built this relationship with someone that feels safe. And maybe that's an adult that you are feeling ready to express that part of yourself with. All of our match support specialists take training once to twice a year on how to support your big. Through that process, providing resources, connecting with our community resources like Metro and also Equality Florida. Your big is not alone in this, and neither are you. So we are here to support. We are here to help, and it is not your big or Big Brothers Big Sisters of Tampa Bay's place to tell your story. That is an honor reserved for you to share with your parent. That is not the position of Big Brothers Big Sisters or your big to share that for you. So we're here to support you in that time. We're here to support your big, but your big is a safe space to share that information with. We do have training, we do have resources. If you are a big who would like to be better prepared for that moment, I welcome you to come to me or to go to your match support specialist to make sure that if your little does come out to you, it is a positive experience for them and for you, and that you are there to support them with open arms and to provide them whatever they may need.
For sure, I would definitely agree with that. And I think that it's important to note that we're trying, so as a big, we can understand that it might be scary when your little comes to you and you don't exactly know what to do with that information. Or as a little, it might even be scary for you to share that with someone that is your mentor, not knowing how they're going to react to that news. And so just know that there's grace in all those situations. Everyone's just here for your support as a little, and everybody just wants you to succeed. And so that's why we partner with these awesome programs that kind of help us guide the way. So if you do have that need for support, either as a big or as a little, or a parent, feel free to reach out to your match support specialist or anyone really at Big Brothers Big Sisters, because we'll help you along the way. So here's another question we have. It says, actually, sorry, one second. It says, I don't know what I identify as. How do I figure it out?
As you want to take that one first?
Sure. I think that there are multiple ways that people go about exploring their identity. And I don't think that youth should feel alone in that. I know a lot of adults that go through many things exploring their identities, because identity is, again, a process. It's something that when we know more and we have more verbiage, we have more understanding of different identities, there become more possibilities to house maybe a part of yourself that feels uncomfortable somewhere. So I guess I can use myself for an example, for a short example. I was assigned female at birth, and I grew up with people referring to me as she, her. And when I was in my teens, that didn't feel right. So the only option that I had when I was growing up was, oh, I guess I must be a boy. So I'm going to try he, him pronouns when I was in college or grad school. And that felt closer, but not quite right. So then finally, when I found my they, them pronouns and came about as, oh, well, non-binary people exist too. We've always existed, but now we have context to talk about it. So then I went and I researched more about what is non-binary. I looked at people who identified as non-binary. And then I felt like my lived experience really fit into the things that some of those folks were saying. So maybe like searching for information with trusted sources and folks, and not putting a ton of pressure on yourself to just have to land on a word, right? Because we're so many things, we're intersectional. And I think that even when we come to a place where we understand our identity, so for me, I'm half Mexican and half white, and I speak Spanish and English. So when I came out as non-binary, I had to figure out how to talk about that in Spanish, which is a language that everything has gender, even like la mesa, right? The table, it's feminine. Why? I don't know, but it is, right? So all of understanding how we identify and putting labels to identities, I'm not sure it should just be like okay, I'll put the marble in the jar right now. Maybe just let the marbles roll around for a while until you figure out if you even want to put them in the jar.
And, to follow that metaphor, you can take the marble out of the jar too, right? So your identity is allowed to change from day to day even. So one thing that we do at youth programs is we always start by introducing ourselves with name and pronouns. And after a while, it gets redundant if we have a lot of people coming to the same programs over and over, because we meet 3 to 4 times a week. But we do it because those pronouns can change on a daily basis. Like, that is okay too. You are constantly having discoveries about who you are as a person. That's just the nature of humanity, is that the only constant thing in this world is change. And so for me, I think that my journey of discovering who I am in terms of my identity, my orientation, is ongoing. I think one thing I realized when I was a little bit older was that there's never going to be a final destination. And I felt like that was very liberating to discover for myself. Because when I first started exploring my identity, I felt like a label was a security blanket for me, because it made me think of community, right? So it was really special for me to identify as a lesbian. I still do, because the history of that word, the community of that word, the family that I feel when I speak that word is so, I think, unique to being queer. It's very precious to me. But at the same time, my identity is actually very fluid. And I think that there's a lot of gender diversity within the category of lesbian or gay or whatever language you use. I think that things are much more fluid than we give them credit for. And if labels serve you, then you can use them. For me, it is a source of comfort. It is a source of community. For others, it can feel like a burden. And both of those things are equally valid. And for me, my journey figuring out my sexual orientation was totally different than my journey figuring out my gender identity. I knew that I was gay before I knew that I was non-binary. And for me, like, as it was a lot of reading and a lot of seeing myself reflected in other people's experiences. Because for me, as a very femme person from birth, I always assumed that meant that I had to be a woman, because that's what I was told for my entire life, was that people that looked like me had to exist in this one way. And it was really hard for me to break out of that way of thinking. And when I did, and when I saw other non-binary femme people and heard their stories on Instagram, reading books, Trans Power by Juno Roche changed my life. There are so many great accessible ways that you can learn about the broad spectrum of identities that exist and are constantly growing, right? So as said, that language is always shifting. We're always finding new ways to categorize ourselves and explore the depths of our gender and sexuality. And I think that's really exciting and dynamic and a really cool thing about being part of this community. And so I think that I always looked at figuring out who I was as this like high pressure activity that had an end goal. And then once I got there, I would feel fulfilled and I would feel comfortable and I would, unlock this thing that made a lot of the inner turmoil and the things I was feeling, they would go away if I just unlocked like, who am I? And I think it's very liberating to know that there is no final destination. And if you feel that you are comfortable in an identity, that's great, but also give yourself the liberty to continuously grow and explore and change.
I want to just hop in and say that if you're joining us, hi, feel free to ask any questions in the comments or as DM. From my personal experience, I would like to say that as a pansexual person dating a man, I want to make a note that it's important to say that since I'm a pansexual dating a man, that doesn't take away my identity as a pansexual person. And I run into that a lot where I had a struggle with that, where it was like, oh, I feel weird going to pride events because I'm a cis woman dating a cis man. So it was a strange feeling that I felt like I almost lost part of my community until I realized that just because you're in a circumstance or just because you don't feel necessarily feel like you can come out or feel like you are one way or the other, as Hannah was saying, you can choose to take the marble out. It doesn't change who you are, and that can change from day to day. So that was something that I had to learn personally, and I just think that's important.
Right. And Laura, I would say that, it's for our viewers, it's really important not to assume people's identities based on who you think they are or who you think they're dating, or who you see they're dating, right? Being a queer, non-binary person who's transmasculine, I'm in a relationship, I'm engaged to a woman, a queer woman. But that doesn't mean we're in a lesbian relationship, so that doesn't change my identity. Our relationship is a queer relationship, yet she keeps her identity and I keep mine. So it's really important not to make assumptions about people.
For sure.
Yeah. And you both bring up beautiful points too, that you are not defined by your partner. You're not defined by your partner, partners, whoever you are dating. Your identity is solely situated in yourself. And I think that rooting yourself in that is something that is also a good tool for self-exploration.
Awesome. Let's move on. So Kate, sorry, go ahead.
For just a second. I also think, especially for some of our littles that may be watching, especially if this is a journey that's new for you, it is 100% valid to come out or invite in as questioning and to say, I don't know a label yet, but I know I'm not this. When you speak of me this way, it makes me uncomfortable. I'm discovering who I am. And while I don't have a label for myself at this moment, I would ask that you not apply this one to me. You can come out and say, I'm not straight, and leave it at that. You do not owe anyone a clear definition of your identity to be accepted for exactly who you are. And you can create that space before you have that final destination that you may not arrive at. It is 100% valid to invite in or come out and say, I don't know, but this is not a label that I am comfortable being defined at in this present moment. So please honor who I am and my journey by not applying that label to me while I have the room to figure myself out, especially if you are of an age where maybe you've never had a partner of any gender. This may be something you are thinking about in theory, and that may change as you go. So just give yourself that space and that grace to grow into who you are, and to ask those that you're bringing along on your journey to respect the space that you're in that given time.
I have a really fun short anecdote actually about that from our programs that I always think of. And that was spoken beautifully, Kate. Thank you for sharing that. But we had one of our youth who was pretty new to programs. They didn't know how they identified yet, but they knew that they were not comfortable with their birth name. But they didn't have an alternative for us, right? Like they just didn't have one that felt right yet. And so they asked us to call them Cthulhu, which is like this, it's this like nerdy reference to like this eldritch abomination. It was this really funny thing that spoke to their personality. And it was a placeholder while they figured themselves out, but it also was this like opportunity for humor and celebration, and like this thing that kind of bonded us as like, it was special to me because it showed that there are so many ways that you can explore, and so many like unique and creative things that you can figure out that feel right in that moment. And also it's okay to be silly about it too. It can be a very serious and deeply personal thing, but it also, there can be levity and joy in the exploration too. And I feel like whenever I think of that, I just feel this like abundance of joy.
I would definitely have to agree. I think sometimes, you can get scared when you think it has to be a certain way and you have to figure it out. And I definitely think it's important to find, the lightheartedness. It doesn't have to become something that overtakes your mind, that makes you feel bad. It can be something fun. It can be something fun for you to explore. So we have a couple of more questions. And this one particularly is for anyone who is maybe younger or maybe doesn't quite know, but I feel like I'm starting to like people of the same sex. What does that mean?
So when I read this question, when you sent it out, the first thing that I thought when I read, like, what does that mean? For me, it means that you have a whole community opening up to you. It means that you have another part of yourself to explore, to learn, to love, and to celebrate. When I was younger, the word that I heard the most commonly used in reference to gayness, if it wasn't a negative thing, it was tolerance. And I've come to really, really dislike the word tolerance, because it taught me that when I came out, maybe I could learn to stand being gay, right? Maybe I could learn to tolerate it. It did not teach me that it was something to celebrate, that there were things that would come out of it that would be absolutely life-changing in the most positive way. That yes, there were struggles, and yes, there are still systemic barriers in place that make my identity in some ways a burden, some ways a liability, but those are not internal to me, right? That is the biases of the larger society. For me, being queer is a thing that I celebrate and that I love about myself, and I would not trade it for anything else in the world. And so when you ask, what does it mean? If I'm starting to wonder if maybe I am not heterosexual, not cisgender, I'm not exactly sure what that looks like yet. But it just means that you have a whole world opening up to you, that it might seem scary to explore, but it's actually something that's really exciting.
And with that excitement, here comes the type A Capricorn part of me, because I have the side art and fun and joy, and then know all the things, make all the lists. So it's really important that when anybody is coming out, they search out reputable and safe sexual health services and relationship services, because we know that a lot of schools still have abstinence-only programs or abstinence plus, and that young people aren't taught about how to stay safe if they're going to engage in physical or sexual activities with their partners or people that they're dating. So that's really important to protect yourself and other people, because a lot of times there aren't people in our schools who are teaching like where to go for resources or how to stay safe with things. We also want youth to know the difference between a healthy and unhealthy and an abusive relationship. So just kind of get ready to have a ton of fun and make sure that you kind of cross your T's and dot your I's and get your information and get it from reputable sources in the community.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of reputable sources, we have 3 right here. So make sure to reach out. We have Metro Health, we have Equality Florida, and Big Brothers Big Sisters. If you're a big or a little, feel free to reach out.
Yeah, and just to plug really quick to get in, since Ez opened that door so perfectly, we offer STI testing, and in the state of Florida, many people don't know this, relevant to LGBT youth and all youth in general. If you are 13 or older, you can get tested without parental consent, and your medical information is private, as it is yours. And so if you want to take agency and ownership over your sexual health, if you want to access barriers that are not just external condoms, but internal condoms, dental dams, if you want to learn what those are, Metro is also a great resource for that. And for healthy relationships, I have to plug Crisis Center of Tampa Bay. If you are located in the Tampa Bay area, they have an amazing healthy relationships guide. You can call them if you have any questions. They always have counselors available to speak to you. So yeah, Ez, that's great advice. Seek out the resources in your area because they're not always provided to you, even though I wish from the bottom of my heart that they were. And Equality Florida is doing great work to campaign for those resources to be provided in schools and to create more inclusive curriculums, because you're right that sex ed is such a core part of figuring out who you are and how to move forward safely in so many ways.
I don't want to cut you off, Kate.
I was just going to say that's such a deeply personal question that I would likely pose back. What does that mean to you, the person asking yourself that question? How do you feel about it? What does your support system look like at home? Are you excited? Are you scared? What that means to you right now is going to be your starting point for where you're going to go from there. Is this your first time having those feelings? Are you confused? I mean, that is going to mean something different for every single person on this earth who would be asking themselves that question.
So here's one kind of geared towards younger people. I'm afraid to tell my parents that I'm coming out, or that I want to come out. What do I say to them?
I think that's really situational. I think Hannah touched on that earlier. Number one, is it a safe situation? Do you anticipate making it an unsafe situation if you say something? Yet there have been cases where students feel like they would not be supported, and then they were surprised that they were supported, which is great. There have been a few instances where students thought that they probably would be supported, and then it didn't come as easy or as quickly as they thought. So safety is number one. I think that, again, if you know your trusted adult at home or adults at home, figuring out if are they calm people? Do they sit down and talk about situations with you with other sensitive topics? Maybe then there'd be a situation that you could go and just verbally say, I have something to tell you and I'd like you to listen. If they tend to get heated or run away from you or yell at you when sensitive topics come up, maybe then a letter. And maybe in certain circumstances, which sounds a little bit sad, but waiting until you have resources to take care of yourself or other folks who are supportive, who you have to fall back on in case something goes really wrong.
Yeah, I think that the point you brought up earlier, as about writing a letter, is a really good tool. I highly recommend therapy and counseling to everybody, just anyone in general, but especially LGBT youth, because we know that statistically, LGBT youth are at higher risk of depression, anxiety, not by any nature of being LGBT, but because of the isolation they face, the discrimination, the bullying, and just how hard it is to come out in a world that tells you you have to default be one way. And that unknown can be really scary. But a very good tool, if it's available to you, is talking through it with a counselor, especially someone who has met your parents, who has context for your situation. A lot of our youth are in our counseling services as well. They can be free for youth under 21, and they are on a sliding scale fee, so they will always be affordable regardless of whether you are insured or underinsured. And having access to someone who is well-versed in LGBTQ plus topics and can help you kind of workshop the best plan of action that is unique to your situation. Counseling is available if you seek it out, and that can be an incredibly helpful tool. And then the Trevor Project's Coming Out Handbook, that has a lot of the things that Ez just mentioned about, like, thinking about your parents in terms of how they react, thinking about if you do want to come out, what circumstances make the most sense. Like, is your family the happiest, most together, most likely to receive you well when you are around the dinner table at night? Is it when you wake up in the morning and are driving to school with your, stepdad or whoever it is you think will be the best person to talk to first? And so kind of creating a plan of action, I think, is always a good move, and figuring out the people that you trust the most to tell, and if it is the right time for you.
I would caution against coming out in moving vehicles. If you're not sure, I came out as queer when I was in college to my mom as she was driving, and that wasn't a good situation. So if you are going to come out, it's good to be in a non-in-motion place sometimes.
Good advice.
My mom's cool now, but yeah, probably if I knew what I know now back then, I probably would have approached her at the dinner table rather than while she was driving.
Yeah, learning from the experience of others too is a very helpful tool. So if you can find any LGBT adults in your life, whether it is, through Metro, whether it is through your school, whether it is through Big Brothers, Big Sisters, if there's someone that's gone through this before you, hearing their experience and their advice and those little pieces of information, like if Ez had told me when I was younger that story, then I probably would have taken that into account and it might have been helpful. And so using whatever resources are available to you, including the people in your life, is also great.
I think that it's important to remember that it's not everyone's going to take the situation, or there's always a community. So if you feel like there's not necessarily one, or you can't find a community, really search online. Like Ez was saying, make those lists of things that exist, because there's, like we're saying, we have 3 wonderful organizations here, Trevor Project. There are so many resources, and thankfully we live in the 20th century. I know saying thankfully we are living in 2020 is not the best right now, but at least for having 2020, we have the resources. You have so many people online, if that's an option available for you, to look things up, and you never have to be alone in these situations.
So for any youth that may be asking themselves that question right now, you are whole and complete exactly as you are, and you deserve for every intersection of your being to be celebrated. If you are questioning if your home is a place where it can currently be celebrated, please seek out communities, be it online or in person, where you do feel that love and acceptance, that complete adoration of who you are. Because if you do come out to your parents and it is not a pleasant situation, you will want somewhere to turn where you can be celebrated. It is incredibly difficult to not feel 100% love and value from your parents, but they do not define your value either. Your value is there, whether they are at a place to see it or not, in the moment that you let them know something that may be shocking to them or confusing. They are humans too, and dear goodness, I hope that they come around to celebrate you wholly. But have those communities in place so that you do have a safe place that you can turn to emotionally as well as physically, should it not go the way that we would all hope it would. That community that Hannah was talking about earlier, that you open yourself up to when you start to ask those questions. If you're unsure, build that first. Build that community of support.
That's awesome.
That's so well said. And I also think that if language is a barrier to you talking to your parents, which is really common, like for example, if your identity, who you feel you are, is not something that they understand because they have not read about it, have not encountered it, don't have the language to engage in that conversation with you. A helpful tool too can be finding articles that are simple, easily digestible, online resources that you can send them so you are not having to engage in the work of explaining who you are to them. That can create a foundation for a good conversation, or it can be a tool after the fact. I would say that not everything has to come down on you. You can use some of those other things that are available to you. So there's even a website that lets you practice pronouns. So if you use they, them pronouns, your parents just don't seem to get it. Something that you can do is send them this website where it gives them sample questions and sentences that they have to type in and try. If they get it wrong, it shows them how to use it correctly. So you don't have to be doing all of the emotional labor. There are things that are available to you that can help have those conversations and help bridge the gap of understanding.
If you do talk to your parents and they are wanting to understand but aren't quite there yet, PFLAG has wonderful resources in English and Spanish. And then also the Family Acceptance Project has some really great downloadable worksheets to be able to show your family that even by them practicing a few more accepting behaviors that create that feeling of belonging, they can really have lessen their adverse effects and increase their positive outcomes for how they treat you within your household and your family. So then it's not coming from you. You can say, hey, I've got this third-party research that's been done for years. If you're not to the place where you can fully embrace me, try on some of these ideas for now so that I don't feel totally unwelcome in the household in which I was raised.
Also, PFLAG Tampa Bay is having virtual coffee hangouts. I believe the first 3 Mondays of the month, I want to say. And that is an all ages space. A lot of families are at PFLAG. And the great thing about PFLAG is it is families of all levels, right? So there are families with kids that are just coming out. There are families with kids that have been out for the last 20 years. There are families with parents who are LGBT. And it's a great educational space too. And so if you are seeking a space for your parents or your guardians to learn from other people that have been through the same things, PFLAG has regular recurring groups that are accessible to you, regardless of location right now.
Cool. So I wanted to focus a little bit more on the gender side of things. And so, Hannah, as you kind of briefly described coming to or being non-binary people, and so I was wondering, kind of, how did you come to that identity, or what advice would you give someone who doesn't quite fit like they fit in their natural born gender?
And if I could, I think that saying assigned gender at birth or assigned sex at birth, because I do the training, so we always want to make sure that people know that assigned sex at birth is different than gender identity, is different than sexual orientation. So if you don't identify with the sex you were assigned at birth or designated at birth, it's a different type of a journey than sexual orientation, I would say, because I've come out twice, once with my sexual orientation and once with my gender identity. And even when I'm trying to talk to people who want to learn about being non-binary, sometimes they're like, I get transgender, because transgender is that you don't identify with the sex you were assigned at birth, but you identify with one of the binary sexes, male or female. And not always, but for our intents and purposes, okay. And then I say, well, here's a good way to think about it. So being non-binary is like having two t-shirts, okay? And you got to go to the store to get something to eat. You're super hungry, but one of the t-shirts you put on and it only comes to here. It's so small, you can't pull it down and get into it. If you went outside, people would have you arrested for indecent exposure, right? So one of the t-shirts is like a baby t-shirt. It doesn't fit your adult body. And then the other t-shirt is so long that you would trip over it outside. Like you couldn't walk in it. You would have to like you were walking in a blanket. So being non-binary is like being given those two t-shirts and having someone say, okay, you got to go down to the store to buy something for me to eat. But you can't go out naked. You have to wear one of these t-shirts, and both of them are ill-fitting, right? Maybe the too large one will cover me better, but it's hard to walk in. So just think of only having two options and neither of them fitting. And then sometimes people can go, oh, or sometimes I use the story of like ill-fitting shoes, right? Someone gives you two pair of shoes. One it has a big high stiletto heel on it and you can't walk in those. And one is a very boxy kind of rectangular piece of wood, right? These shoes that are wooden, and they're bad on your feet. And everyone has walked in a pair of ill-fitting shoes before. So think about how that made you feel, right? You get blisters, your feet would bleed, but if you kept doing it, your posture might suffer, or your muscles in your back might hurt. So that's kind of what it feels like when people say, choose one or the other, and you're not one or the other. You might be a combination of both or neither.
Yeah, I love those examples, as I've never heard those before, and those are such helpful tools. And also, I invite people to imagine how frustrating it might feel if they then tell you that those are the only two t-shirts in the world, right? If someone is telling you that there are no more t-shirts, these are the only ones you can see, these are the only ones you've been told about, and so they're the only ones that exist. And that's kind of what it feels like. Me and my partner are both non-binary, and they also work with youth. And right now they are a camp counselor. And it's really fun working especially with like 6 and 7-year-olds, because they ask the wildest questions and have like such a creative understanding of the world. And they were both like playing on their different mats, and it was the boy mat and the girl mat, and they wouldn't share. And they were trying to get my partner to come play with them, and they were like, well, there's no space for me. I would play, but I can't. I'm not a boy or a girl. And they were like, what do you mean? Are you a boy and a girl? And they're like, kind of, but also neither. And they like, you could see their little brains just like whirring. But what they did next was they pushed the mats together, because before everything else, they wanted to play with this person that they thought was really fun and cool and sweet. And I wish that our world was a little bit simpler now, that adults could be as open-minded and willing to change as children are, because it really is that simple. It is just reframing your understanding of gender, because I was taught, like most other people in the world, or at least in the United States that are in the public school system especially, that there are only two options. And especially if you visibly fit into one, that must be the one that makes sense for you. But there are so many people that suffer because of binary constructs of gender, just because they don't quite fit the mold. And so they spend their whole lives trying to crush parts of themselves and remold parts of themselves to try and fit these arbitrary expectations that are largely socialized. And so, the simplest way that I break it down when someone is confused is just that I don't fit into the categories of female and male, and that also those are socially constructed. And then I just provide examples from my life too. And I also add a lot of resources too. So like, if I'm not the best at explaining things to someone, if there is a barrier to communication, if they are not at a point where they are really willing to open their mind quite yet to have that dialogue, or if I have been talking about it for the last 5 days, which, Ez and I are paid to talk about this. So maybe it's a little different, but I'm sure that they can resonate with the fact that if it's in your personal life, it gets a little tiring to rehash it every single time and to educate people you come into contact with. And so there are really great books. There's one called Life Outside the Binary, Trans Power. There are websites that you can send to people. And so while I do the work with people I care about and in my daily life of telling people what it's like to be non-binary, I also sometimes just defer for my own mental health and my own capacity for talking.
Yeah, I think that you brought up something that is really important to talk with youth about, and also adults, is that there's no one way to look non-binary. I think when we started talking about non-binary identities as a concept, a lot of ways that folks were putting out visual representations of non-binary people were folks who might look more like me, more on the androgynous or transmasculine side. And we don't want to have anyone in our community discounted because of how they present their gender expression, right? Because our gender expression is how we look on the outside, but our gender identity is who we are on the inside. So people really need to think about that. And there's a great article in Teen Vogue, go figure. They're like kind of killing it with some of their articles on gender and sexuality these days. And there's one on 11 myths or things that aren't true that people have told you about being non-binary, and that was one of them. So that kind of resonated in my head when you said, you present as femme, but you're a non-binary person, and people shouldn't make assumptions based on their gender stereotypes of what feminine or female is in any given society at any given time, right?
Mm-hmm. And I think something that Hannah said was super important, that sometimes you don't feel like doing the work if you've explained and explained and explained and people aren't getting it, or you're kind of just tired of that. Don't feel like it has to come all on you. Realize that there are resources, that there are people that can there are articles, there are books. I know that personally there was a book that came into that was very useful for me to give to my Christian father. So there are resources all over the internet that are available for you to explain these things if you don't have the words, or you're just kind of tired of doing that emotional work. All right, so we have about 5 minutes left, and I wanted to give some time to let people explain what their organizations do again, just so that if you are watching this and you do reach out, we'll have this video available online at the BBBS YouTube page. And so I just wanted to give them the opportunity to once again kind of say what they do and explain a little bit more about their resources so that you can feel free to reach out to them. So let's start with Hannah.
Okay, so Metro Inclusive Health offers primary health care. Some things that came up that are relevant to this conversation, since we just span so much. I definitely want to plug our counseling resources. I want to emphasize the fact that we have incredible therapists on staff that specialize in working with LGBTQ plus youth. Many of them are LGBT themselves, and it will be affordable to you or your family. They're really flexible. It is on a sliding scale fee. It can be free for youth under 21 if you qualify for that. And so I encourage you, if you are at all thinking about aspects of your identity, at all struggling with anxiety or depression or your self-esteem, because that is something that I really wish that I had access to when I was younger, was a good counselor, because it has really changed my life. We also have trans healthcare services. And so our counselors, many of them are able to write letters of support. So if something that you would like to do in your life is transition, start HRT, you can go to a counselor, get a letter of support, get your blood work done in-house at Metro, and start HRT. So it is all in-house, which makes it really accessible, really easy for people. That's pretty great. Also, our community programs. Please, if you are in search of other people like you, if you want to talk about what's going on in your life, if you are an LGBT youth in search of a supportive space, You can apply for our virtual programs at metrotampabay.org/virtual programs registration, or it's right on our main website. If you just click community, you can register for them. We have tons of options. I can't even list all the groups now. But if you're a member of the trans community, an LGBTQ plus older adult, a youth, someone who is questioning, there is a space for you there, and they are more accessible now than they ever have been before, because it does not matter where you are. You can be in Ruskin, Florida, you can be in rural Arkansas, and you can still tune into our programs. And week 2 of LGBT summer camp is July 27th to the 31st. The last day to register is tomorrow by noon. So if you would like to get in there, if that is something that sounds exciting to you. Week 1 was incredible. Week 2, we already have 50 registrations. We're going to have like 45 campers, so it's going to be a big group. So I encourage you to still apply by tomorrow. And man, there's a lot going on. If you'd like to know about more of Metro's resources about our primary healthcare or our STI testing or sexual healthcare, any of the myriad things we offer, please check out our website at metrotampabay.org.
Awesome. Thank you for being here. What are you guys doing over at Equality Florida?
Wow, a lot. So in our Safe and Healthy Schools program, right now we're doing summer trainings all over the state. I just finished 8 in June for the Pinellas Schools District. So if you're a little or a big and little and you would like some training to happen at your little school, get in contact with us at the Safe and Healthy Schools program. The other really exciting thing that we're working on right now is my coworker, Gemelis, who is the coordinator down in South Florida. I'm in Pinellas. We are going to be co-guiding the first Florida LGBTQ Youth Leadership Council. So we're going to have representation from all over the state, and we're going to meet virtually twice a month for 9 months with the same cohort of kids. And this is an opportunity to build advocacy skills, communication, learn about how to get involved in politics and lobbying. And also, we really want feedback from youth on how we're doing in safe and healthy schools, because we primarily work with educating administrators, student services staff, educators, and adults in community, working with PTAs. So we want to hear from kids, from youth, what it is important to them that we bring forward to our adults that we work with. So the Leadership Council applications will be going out in the next 2 weeks. And again, it's 9 months for students between 8th grade and 12th grade. And one of the thoughts that we had that was, if the students are into it, for them all to work together to create a presentation that they can present at our All Together Now conference, which happens yearly from Equality Florida Safe and Healthy Schools program. And they can come and present that if we're back in person, and they could also take it around the state virtually. So it will be a youth presentation for adults, and we will just be there to guide them. We think that it will be a really good opportunity for students to either get credit for service hours if they need it in their high school. We would be able to write them letters of recommendation after working with them for college or post-secondary programs. So we're really excited about that development right now. We work with GSAs. So if you're a student or a youth who would like to get involved in your school's GSA, or who would like to start a GSA in your school, we have GSAs in middle schools, and almost all of our high schools in Pinellas County have GSAs. So if you'd like to get involved that way, we can definitely point you to an advisor that already exists, or maybe suggest someone who's a supportive adult of LGBTQ kids in whatever school that you attend. We also have a Florida virtual school contact, and they have a virtual GSA online. So because we don't know if we're going to be in person or virtual next semester, but we are thinking outside the box.
So if you're watching, we kind of cut out, again, technical difficulties the first time we do this. So I wanted to give Ez the opportunity to kind of explain the rest of what she was saying, because there's really some great resources there, and then Kate, and then we will officially end the live.
Cool. And just a reminder, I use they, them pronouns.
I'm so sorry about that.
Oh, no problem. I was talking about our LGBTQ COVID resource guide that we have at our Equality Florida Safe and Healthy Schools page. So it's for families, students, school staff, educators, anyone. can really go there and find resources because it's quite extensive. And then the last thing is that we have a lot of like best practices guides and like even one-pagers on our Safe and Healthy Schools site. So if you are a youth who would like to bring some information to your guidance counselor or your school social worker, we have things that are PDFs that you can download there, or you can just tell your adults in school that you'd like them to go there and check them out because it's all based on best practices nationally and then locally in Florida as well. Yeah, and we're at equalityflorida.org.
Go ahead, Kate.
Okay. So we are Big Brothers Big Sisters. We are a one-to-one mentoring organization. If you are a little and you are watching and you are looking for a supportive adult, your match support specialist is a safe space. They will be a supportive adult. If you don't know who your match support specialist is, it's that person who calls you and asks you all of the questions about your match. We don't just want to know how your match is doing. We want to know how you are doing. So please reach out. If you don't know who they are, hunt me down. I'll hunt them down. We'll get you connected and we'll get you the resources and support that you are looking for. And if you are a big whose little has either come out to you or you just want to be prepared should it happen in the future, we offer 2 trainings a year, always put on by a third party. Both Metro and Equality Florida have provided trainings for our bigs in the past. We just had one with Equality Florida 2 weeks ago, so it would be a little ways out, our next formal training. But we've got information to tide you over. I would love to have a conversation with any of you, and thank you for being an adult who is willing to show up 100% for your little and accepts them for the full person that they are becoming.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for everything. Again, great resources, and we will have all those resources available in the information of this video. And so if you have any questions, again, feel free to DM here on the Instagram, on Facebook. There are so many ways to get information involved, either if you're a big or little, or if you found us on a different way, feel free to reach out because there's, as we shared, so many great resources that can help you out. Thank you all for coming and for engaging in this awesome conversation. I know I learned a lot, and so we just want to thank you for your involvement in this. Have a great day, everyone that's watching, and we'll see you later. Bye.